Very warm welcome to everyone joining us for today's live stream. Today, we're going to be talking about LIFE-AR, which is and stands for the Least Developed Countries Initiative for Effective Adaptation and Resilience. We have two really special guests with us today. Tracy Kajumba, hopefully pronouncing that correctly. She's the director of the LIFE-AR Interim Secretariat, which is based at the Institute for Environment and Development, IIED, and climate change adaptation and resilience expert, Madhu Cham. Hopefully I'm getting your name correctly as well, but please do correct me if I've got it wrong. Cham is UNFCCC National Focal Point and Climate Change Specialist at the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources of the Gambia. He's a leading voice in national climate policy and adaptation planning. Together, we're going to be exploring how least developed countries, LDCs, are shaping climate adaptation efforts, enabling whole of society engagement and building systems that work with and for communities. We've got so much to learn from what LIFE-AR is doing. Really looking forward to digging into some of these great initiatives. Tracy Cham, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Grant.
Thank you, Grant.
So, Tracy, as I mentioned, you're the director of the LIFE-AR Interim Secretariat. Can you tell us a bit about your background, what brought you to work, to the work that you currently do? What inspired you to get involved in this work?
Thank you, Grant. And first of all, thank you for inviting us to this show, and to all those that have joined us, welcome. So I've been so long on this, I think, almost 20 years on climate adaptation. My career started in the civil service in Uganda. And later on, I joined K International, working on environment and governance programs. And we started talking about climate change adaptation then for communities living adjacent to protected areas. And we were witnessing a lot of climate impacts, floods, landslides, trying to figure out what is happening. And I always had an interface with the gendered impacts of climate change. So I started doing that work in terms of understanding what tools we could use, understanding what are the risks, how do we respond to that. And I really picked interest in that, knowing it's going to be a long-term problem. And I specialized on that and continued to learn and grow and get into research, national policy. I moved on from CARE to the Africa Climate Change Resilience Alliance, working in Ethiopia, Uganda, Mozambique, getting more into national policy, strengthening capabilities to develop policies and systems and research. And later on joined Ireland Department of Foreign Affairs as a regional senior climate change advisor for Sub-Saharan Africa, digging deeper into bilateral programs. How does financing get to the vulnerable countries? How do we track it? How do we report? Aligned to the UNFCCC processes as well. And finally, I ended up in IIED, going deeper into research on adaptation, working with the grassroots movements, looking at equitable partnerships and the power dynamics within access to finance and climate action and adaptation. So working on LIFE-AR for me is so exciting because I've worked with governments before, and this is different because it is the LDCs trying to lead what is happening. So yeah, so that's how I've been working around climate. It feels like donkey years ago.
Yes, you've got quite a extensive history, starting in Uganda, civil service, right? Thank you very much, Tracy. Cham, we just turn to you briefly now as well. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to get your video working. but you're climate change specialist at the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources in the Gambia. On your side, how did you get involved in the climate change sector? What brought you to the work that you do?
Thank you very much, Grant. Good morning, good afternoon, and evening to everybody, and wherever you are watching from. Thank you very much, Grant, for that introduction of the initial introduction of me. My name is Modu Cham. I work with the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources, and in particular at the Climate Change Secretariat, serving as the LIFE-AR national focal point for the Gambia, and also UNFCCC, deputy focal point on the national arrangement. I'm a trained rural and community development worker with background on environmental education and management and climate change. So my motivation to the work that I'm presently doing date back to my secondary school days. The love I have for the sciences, including environmental science and also environmental education and management. So this is the source of my motivation, which caused my way to study environmental education and management at tertiary level with orientation on rural and community development. So since then, I've been also engaging in initiating climate change activities projects at community, ward, and regional level before pursuing higher education on climate change and sustainable development. So this strong desire is actually what guides me to positively impact, life and livelihood, which I found, is so crucial, and the only institution that can help me to, materialize this desire was the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources, in particular at the Climate Change Secretariat. This is how I find myself, working with the institute. Thank
you very much. Great pleasure that you're able to join us today. Lovely to hear also that story that started in high school. Your interest in this sector. It's inspiring to know that there are always people coming up who are going to drive forward climate action and maybe get involved in the LIFE-AR program as they emerge into their working career. So, Tracy, can you tell us more about LIFE-AR? Can you tell us a bit about its purpose, its approach and such like? And just to let everyone know, we've got the QR code here for LIFE-AR. Feel free to scan that while we dig in a little bit to the program. So starting off, what's its purpose and vision for LIFE-AR?
Thank you, Grant. So LIFE-AR is an least developed countries initiative. It is led and driven by the LDC Group, as defined in the UNFCCC negotiations. So it is hosted at the International Institute for Environment and Development, but IIED is an interim host. We are actually transitioning to an LDC-led entity with independent officers, just for clarity. So this initiative came about as a result of the LDCs recognizing the challenges they were experiencing with accessing climate finance. We've come a long way, definitely. Many governments were struggling accessing funds from the Green Climate Fund or other funds. And usually the challenge was like LDCs don't have capabilities or they don't pass the due diligence. So it was really, really difficult. It's still difficult because even now looking at the climate data, its access to climate finance has dropped even from the 14%. But this is what the LDCs are trying to address. But there's a lot of work that has been done before. LDCs trying to lead, but finding those power dynamics and challenges to access. So they started by doing a global evidence review to look at what are the barriers to accessing climate finance and what are the mechanisms that LDCs could use to access finance. But the difference this time, they are not looking at it from vulnerable countries accessing financing, but it's about taking leadership and deciding to change things for themselves than relying on donors to always do things for them. So it's a partnership-based initiative where the LDCs have identified what the problems are from their side. What do they need to improve to be able to access finance? But they're also challenging the international community on the things they need to do to enable financed flow to the countries. So it's a two-way kind of thing. So there are partnership principles that the LDC Group has put in place, looking at issues of fairness, because usually in addressing adaptation, we're looking at the donor providing money, recipients getting it, abiding to the rules and terms. But adaptation is not about that. It needs everybody working together to be able to solve the problem. So the LDC Group did all that work, working with the universities, the LDC University Consortium on Climate Change, and came up with delivery mechanisms to enable financed flow to the country. And the LDC Group has a vision of being on climate resilient pathways by 2030 and net zero by 2050. So there are 3 long-term initiatives, and LIFE-AR is one of those long-term initiatives, and looking at the impact of resilient people, resilient economies, and resilient landscapes. So the approach of LIFE-AR is strengthening systems and capabilities of LDCs to be able to access financing, because usually the problem is like there's no capacity to access the finance. Even if you increase the amount, do we have the systems to channel at the local level? So there's that local component as well. It's not just about governance systems, but how does finance flow to the local level? So there are 5 areas that LIFE-AR looks at in terms of approach. So we are looking at capabilities of LDCs to access the money. There's the issue of finance, recognizing that it's not just about money. We might have the money, but if it's not deployed well, we will not still be able to adapt. So there's the capabilities and finance. There's a target that at least 70% of the climate finance should get to the local level. It's very challenging to make that happen, but we are working with all countries to look at how do we plan and budget that 70% is invested in community priorities and the 30% is
I think we may have just lost Tracy from the call. At least it's frozen on my side. We'll try and get her back. But in the meantime, if I could just turn to you, Cham. Are you still hearing me? Are you still here?
Yes, that I'm hearing you.
I understand that the Gambia is one of the 6 front-runner countries for LIFE-AR. What does it mean for the Gambia to be involved in this initiative? What do you do within the initiative as a country?
Thank you very much, Girat. We all understand that climate change is beyond national, regional, and in fact now it's global. So the Gambia haven't understand that he cannot do it alone, and it is glad that he got an initiative which is LIFE-AR. That is a combination of countries with common vision to addressing climate challenges. So the Gambia's involvement, considering the issues of promoting multilateralism, as well as national and international approaches and actions to address climate change, due to the fact that there is this understanding that no one can do it alone. In addition, climate action relevant to adaptation and resilience building is both, is a key priority as far as the country is concerned, and we found out that LIFE-AR is at the trajectory of enhancing, the LDC's adaptation and resilience, pathway. So this been a very important priority as far as the country is concerned, both in the long and in the short term. We feel that our involvement in LIFE-AR would be very, crucial. And since then, we have been involving with other front-runner countries, trying to enhance both our collective and individual action in putting up, relevant system at the moment to enhance our adaptation and resilience to climate change, due to the fact that the country, especially the Gambia, been highly involved to climate change. Its communities and individuals would require a system that is quite reliable and support the cause of building their resilience. LIFE-AR for the Gambia is deeply necessary to address both common regional and international problems against climate change. And most importantly, LIFE-AR approach is aimed at leveraging climate finance, as Tracy mentioned. Of course, coordination, governance, capabilities, and so on. So we found that this is the best approach that the country is working on together with other front-runner countries, and development partners to enhance adaptation and resilience to our communities. So this is actually what is motivating our involvement and recently our engagement with LIFE-AR. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cham. And Tracy, I will come back to you in just a moment. You were telling us about the principles of LIFE-AR, and capacity is number one, and finance number two, with this target of 70% of finance going to the local level, which I just find a fantastic and inspiring goal, even though it is challenging there. I just wanted to, before I come back to you, to give you a little chance to continue with the other principles, just wanted to welcome everyone who is on our call today. We've got some great messages coming through on the chat. We have Anna, who is in the UK working on climate change and social protection. We have Raston Lazaro. I don't know where you're from. Oh, you're from Tanzania. Fantastic. Thank you. Pleasure to have you here. And we have Gurafomo Drabo from SNV in Burkina Faso. Fantastic that you're joining us. And Charles, great to see you here. We know each other from some time back. Great that you're joining us on this. So if you haven't already, please do feel free to introduce yourself in the comments, and also engage with us. If you have questions you would like to ask of our guests, please do pose them into the comments. We'd really love to hear from you. And we're going to try and respond to everything live while we're speaking. If we don't manage to cover everything, we'll follow up by putting in responses in the LinkedIn comments or in YouTube, wherever you're joining us from. So let's continue, and getting back to you, Tracy. You were telling us about the principles, firstly, capacity, capability, and finance. You want to continue from where you left off?
Thank you, Grant. I was talking about planning and saying that for people working on adaptation, we've been talking about integrating climate into planning processes. But because we work in sectors, it becomes very difficult sometimes to have a holistic view of how this is happening. And one of the reasons or aims that LIFE-AR tries to address is moving away from silos and sector-based planning. Because at country level, you'll find that there are ministries that get more funding than others, depending on what they are doing. And yet the impacts of climate are not sectoral. They impact communities across the board. So what we are trying to do is a whole of society and whole of government approach. LIFE-AR does not go to countries with projects. We are trying to do things differently. We start with are there systems and capabilities to channel the finance to the local level? But then the question is the money for what? So there's work that is done on understanding what are the climate risks, context-specific climate risks. And the responses might fall in any sector. It doesn't have to be predefined, because where we are getting it wrong is defining I have money for energy or I have money for agriculture. And then we are going into communities that might be experiencing different climate impacts. And what we are providing is not the response. So we are letting communities lead in these discussions, do climate risk assessments, understand what the climate impacts are, discuss adaptation options, and then those will inform which sectors we're investing in. So at the start, where we have the establishment phase, is where we bring all governments together. One ministry hosts the initiative, but the task teams, the national platforms, bring together representation from across government. So that if the investments are agriculture related, then Ministry of Agriculture comes in. If it's energy, that relevant ministry comes in to support that investment. So that is how the coordination and the planning is working. And while ministries at national level will do the systems and capabilities and the planning, the financing gets to the local level and working very closely with the local governments. And that's what the locally led adaptation approaches are really looking at, of how do communities or local institutions take leadership in that. So that's how we are working on the principle of planning. And I talked about governance as well. All these institutions and platforms and are trying to bring in different groups, gender and social inclusion, being careful about that to make sure that groups that are likely to be left behind are also included in the decision making, making sure that the subsidiarity of decision making at all levels includes all those groups that are likely to be left behind. So, and while the LDCs are trying to do all those things, but they are also asking the international community, how are you helping us to achieve this? To get 70% to the lower level requires that there's predictable and adequate finance that is coming to the LDCs, and it's also long term. Because the challenge, one of the findings was that we are doing adaptation projects for a year or 2 years, and we know that adaptation is a long-term issue. You can't build resilience in a year or two. So the question is there a commitment to provide long-term funding that is adequate, that is predictable, to enable this change process to happen? And we talk about coordination, but coordination also needs to happen within the funding entities. We have a number of multilateral organizations. We have a number of bilateral organizations. How do we coordinate around things? You know, if you come and do due diligence and they have everything in place, then another institution comes to do another due diligence and another. So countries are finding themselves responding to different asks from different donors instead of doing the work. And at the end of the day, some of them are saying, if you don't spend the money in the year, we are taking it back. Are we really committed to addressing adaptation? So the rules, the systems, the bureaucracy is what this initiative is trying to break. And their funders are now supporting the LDC Group to achieve the vision. Oh, sorry, my screen blacked out. I thought I had gone up. And we don't call them donors. They are development partners. They are partners. I want to emphasize the word partners. It's because of this donor-recipient relationship that is failing us to move forward. So we look at ourselves as a partnership between the LDCs and the international community. So the UK government, Ireland, Canada, the US was on board until January. And we've also got the Climate Quadrature Foundation also joining LIFE-AR. We look at solving problems together, not donor recipients. Our board consists of both LDCs and the development partners. And they are not coming in because they are giving money. They are coming in to look at how do the LDCs achieve the vision? How do we plan together and solve the problems together? So, and there are innovative things in there. We report, we've tried to do a semi-pooled fund so that each donor is not asking for things, because LDCs are trying to reduce the transactional costs to enable them focus on really climate action on the ground and doing the work. And one of the interesting innovations is that even the development partners who are providing the money contribute to our annual report. That is the first of its kind. They've been around for a long time, but this is the only initiative where donors also report on what they are doing, because the LDCs have offered to do particular things that donors also have committed to do. That's why we are calling them partners, not donors. So they also report. How are they making sure that financing is getting down to the local level? So we are all really trying something very innovative, very ambitious, but the will and the commitment is there to make it happen.
Wow. That really is radical. I mean, it is completely turn around of the normal processes that many of us are so used to. Just to mention one of them there, you mentioned around the planning and the risk assessment, looking at the options rather than starting with silos and saying, we're going to do an energy project, we're going to do an agriculture project. Because what happens normally with these climate funds and a lot of donor funding, they say it's agricultural money. And now we go into the community to find the project rather than something being driven by the needs as identified by the project and cross-cutting. Yeah, it's radically different. Yes, carry on, Tracy. You're welcome to respond to that.
No, that's what I was saying, that for a long time, really, most of the interventions in the LDCs have been externally driven. That's what LDC Group is trying to change. Can we show leadership as LDCs? Letting communities respond based on the climate impacts and challenges they're experiencing, so that we are really responding to the actual problems on the ground. Otherwise, we have investments that are not fit for purpose, and then resilience does not happen. We don't adapt. It's not easy, but we are realizing it can be done if there's commitment to do it. And we are hoping that others, especially, we have a strong alignment with the locally led adaptation principles, but implementation is the other thing. So we use the word business unusual a lot. And business unusual is not retrofitting what you're doing and calling it something else, but we're looking at actually changing how things work.
Okay.
So, yeah.
You mentioned locally led adaptation, and in fact, that's one of the questions that Restone Lazaro from Tanzania is asking us: is how can you engage the local initiatives in climate resilience? So this is one of the questions we've received via LinkedIn. If others listening have additional questions, please do ask them there. And Cham, if I could turn to you, perhaps you've got some examples of this in the Gambia, or you can say what would be best practice around this. It'd be great to hear your experience in engaging local initiatives in climate resilience. Just checking that you're not muted, perhaps, Cham. Okay, we may have connectivity issues there. So just to turn to you, Tracy.
Thank you very much.
Here we go.
Okay,
carry on.
Thank you very much. Just to revise a bit with regards to the country's engagement of
Yeah, we've got some connectivity here. So, Jim, if you just would stay off for a moment.
Girard, can you hear me?
It's coming and going. We're hearing you and they're not hearing you. I'd love to give you the voice. Just try it once more, and then otherwise I'll turn to Tracy to give some initial response to this. Okay, Tracy, perhaps you could give some response in terms of it. How do you engage local initiatives in climate resilience?
Thanks, Grant, and thanks.
Okay.
There he is.
Carry on, Tracy.
Okay. Thanks, Raston, for the question. Like I mentioned, LIFE-AR works a lot with it's a government initiative. But what we've done, another approach I should mention, is that we are looking at not reinventing the wheel. So this initiative is built on building what is existing in government already, either learning together or strengthening. So the first thing we do when work starts in the country is to look at what is already there in terms of adaptation mail systems, or the national adaptation plans or NAPs, the NDCs. What are the priorities? How do they align with what the LDCs are trying to do in this initiative? That is at the establishment phase. You'll find that we are trying to pull things together. If the country is already tracking some of the indicators related to what LIFE-AR is trying to do in the offers, can we pull that and also be able to report across different things? So in terms of implementation, we have 6 countries that are moving to investment level. We are trying to learn with others to see what they are doing that might align with what LIFE-AR is doing. We haven't had practical experiences on the ground, but across the board, across government, we are trying to do cross-learning with other initiatives. One of the major components of the initiative is a learning component that looks at communities of practice, where LDCs are able to learn from each other. Because most of the time, we've looked for lessons externally, but we are looking at the South-South learning, one country learning from another. One of the LIFE-AR principles is leaving nobody and no country behind. So countries have different capabilities. Some are experiencing conflict or risks or whatever. So if they've joined this initiative, how do we work with them along this journey, learning from others, bringing lessons together? And that includes some of the other initiatives, because the 3 delivery mechanisms that were developed through the Global Evidence Review was through other projects that have been implemented or programs to be able to inform this initiative. So the learning component is very strong, and we're hoping that we'll be able to learn from other local initiatives, especially those that are promoting locally led adaptation principles, or those that are working within the 3 delivery mechanisms LIFE-AR uses. One of them is the decentralized climate finance, which has been tested in a number of countries, Kenya, Mali, Tanzania, Senegal, and informs this initiative. And there's social protection as well, which is the other delivery mechanism. And there's one that also looks at private sector, the SMEs, to see how does aggregation with private sector, government work together to respond to some of the bigger strategies like the NDCs and NAPs and others. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to turn to you, Cham, and I'm going to give you a little bit more time to speak. There could be a delay, and therefore we end up talking on top of one another. While you respond to the question, because we'd love to hear what you're doing there in the Gambia, I'm going to put on this link, which comes from the LIFE-AR website, how to channel climate funds to the local level, choosing the delivery mechanism, which I think applies to what you've just been saying there, Tracy, in terms of those 3 delivery mechanisms. So Cham, let's see if we can hear your thoughts on this. No, we're not getting it through. Yes, go ahead. Maybe I'm a little bit premature.
Okay, Girat, I hope you are hearing me. Yes, I hope you are hearing me.
Yep, please go ahead.
Okay, that's fine. Currently, the Gambia is trying to complete, its establishment, phase. LIFE-AR operates, in two phases, which is the establishment phase, putting the necessary mechanism and the system that enhances, ownership, transparency, effectiveness, efficiency in terms of delivering, climate action. The country at the moment is completing, its establishment phase by putting in place, these mechanisms. So this mechanism is supposed to enhance, the test and evolve. And in this test and evolve, we expect to work with the communities that would be, initiated, or that would be, led by the delivery mechanism. The delivery mechanism here is, an institution or a body that is being identified to work, with the community to understand actually what is their, adaptation and resilience need. Because in this case, it's the communities that are supposed to lead, the process, not the external partners or not the partners. So we are able to identify a delivery mechanism that works directly with the community, that have, their personnel operating at the level of the grassroots, that can directly engage the community and understand what is their problem. But then what is amazing here is that after completing the establishment phase, we get to test and evolve phase, where we, work with the community. And the primary purpose here is that, it should be led by the community. It should be led by the community, and the approach would be participatory community investment planning. And in this participatory community investment planning, it is the communities that takes the lead in terms of informing what is their adaptation and resilience need. It is community driven. It's not external partners, that inform the community as to what is their need, but instead, it's the community that takes the lead to inform, the partners through, the participatory approach as to what is their adaptation and, resilience building need. So the Gambia at the moment, as I said, we've just completed the establishment phase, and now we are preparing to get to the test and evolve phase, where the community would be taking the lead to deliver, to inform, what is their adaptation and resilience need for investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cham. So good to hear from you. I'm glad we managed to hear your voice there. One of the things that you're saying is really about the grassroots and hearing from the grassroots. And often people will say those people in the communities, they don't actually know what adaptation is. They don't know what those needs are. How would you respond to that? I mean, that argument that we know better than those people in the communities because we've got all our science and knowledge and such like. How would you respond to that type of message?
Gerard, this is why LIFE-AR is trying to put up, a system that is reliable, that is dependable, in terms of fixing some of those issues that you've just highlighted. This is the establishment phase. What is necessary to be in place to put up and rectify anything that would serve as a constraint for communities taking the lead in terms of their needs, in terms of their wants, in response to climate change, for adaptation and resilience building. So many would say that, but the communities, if you remember, one development thinker, Robert Chambers, says whose reality counts. Is it the community or the experts? So we believe the communities understand and know best what they want. if they are directed accordingly. And this is what the establishment phase of LIFE-AR is trying to do. This is why in my initial discussion, I made mention of the delivery mechanism. This delivery mechanism, as I said, work at the community level. They understand communities because they are directly working with them. It is just a matter of employing some certain techniques, which is the participatory development techniques, which that the delivery mechanism would use to facilitate, not to dictate, but to facilitate the communities to come out, with their needs. And this participatory approach involves so many techniques. One of these techniques, include problem ranking and prioritization. Who lead that? It is the community that tells the people what is their problem. The facilitator is there as a technician to support the community. From this problem ranking, you get to problem analysis. And this problem analysis, the community look at their problems critically, the cause, the effect, coping strategy, and possible solutions in each of these problems that that might be highlights. So you'll find out that the system or the approach that we'll be using by the delivery mechanism, it is a participatory and popular approach which the community takes the lead. But then the experts would be only there to facilitate and guide the process. So we are very much, we understand very well that the community knows even better than the expert when it comes to their realities.
Yeah.
So LIFE-AR with the establishment phase, now we have already put this thing in place. Now it's a matter of engaging the communities on what they know best than the experts, but how do we facilitate them to come up with with the need. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Really comprehensive answer there. We have been talking about locally led adaptation, referring to it a little bit as we've been speaking, and I've put on this link for the locally led adaptation principles in practice from the LIFE-AR website. One of the ideas that is raised in the comments, Ruth has talked about this idea of silos and breaking away from the silos so that we integrate climate resilience into planning. She's written quite a long, comprehensive comment and input on that. So really, thank you very much. The idea really of ensuring this partnership idea, working with communities, helping and facilitating that you've just been talking about there, Cham, it's part of this idea of locally led adaptation, isn't it? Tracy, could you tell us a little bit, just emphasize how LIFE-AR incorporates or builds upon and embeds those ideas of locally led adaptation?
Thank you, Grant. And just for the sake of our audience who might not be very familiar with locally led adaptation, it's getting quite familiar now. So LLA or locally led adaptation principles were developed under the Global Commission for Adaptation. But I remember those conversations started here at LIFE-AR, and I remember like yesterday when we were talking through this, but with so many partners coming together over this to bring in the lived experiences and the tacit knowledge that they've had about adaptation over the years. And like we said, we've tried many things. They're working or not working. A lot of evaluations have been done on where adaptation is not working, whether it's transformative or not. But the issue of local has been going on for long. localization, the grand bargain, all those we're looking at how do we enhance locally led adaptation, or how do we get local communities to lead. But usually the challenge is, I think with locally led adaptation principles, we are trying to look at, others have principles as well, the grand bargain and all, but the power dynamics within that, centering it around communities, trying to understand what does local even mean. So drawing from evidence, from practice of what works and what doesn't work. 130 governments and non-government organizations have signed up to the LLA principles. They are quite ambitious as well, but I think we have a lot of work around the principles as well, because it requires change of mindset in terms of finance, delivery systems, because most of it is rooted in business as usual ways of working or top-down ways of working that need to change. So having the principles is one thing, but as I said earlier, implementing them is the other. So the advantage we have in LIFE-AR is that when you look at the principles of LIFE-AR or the asks and offers in place, they are very much aligned with the locally led adaptation principles. And we have the opportunity to do things right from the start, because we have, I'm not judging any organization, but I've attended meetings and all that where people are saying, oh, we are already doing the local led adaptation principles. And indeed, when you look at the principles, there's nothing new. We are talking about decision-making being devolved to the lowest level. Everybody has been chasing that. Gender and social inclusion, or providing patient funding. So that the challenge we have is how do we actually do this in practice, so that we are not LLA washing to say we are doing it, but we are doing the same business as usual as before. So in the design of LIFE-AR, we've looked at all the 8 principles. That document has been shared that gives the practical examples of how we are trying to do this, like devolving decision-making to the local level. We've already talked about how investments are really driven by the climate realities on the ground than being decided from upwards. Addressing structural inequalities, I would look at this from even the global level, where the least developed countries, because of their vulnerabilities, have looked at the problem of not accessing finance and taking it down to the local and national levels. But we are also looking at how do women, youth, children, marginalized groups, disabled, how do they get included in that? So we're trying to build this as we implement the initiative, which is an opportunity because it's moving alongside the conversations of LLA. The issue of providing patient and predictable funding is one of the big ones that we are tackling at global level. And also to note that we are really open and keen to work with the multilateral funds and other fund providers to share with them lessons we are getting from the LDCs, to help them as they do their reforms, to share what we are learning, to contribute to what they are doing, so that we are all moving together, being informed by the evidence that is being generated on the ground. So that is still a challenge, and LIFE-AR is working on that. It's basically one of the core elements of why the LDCs started this initiative. The issue of capabilities and leaving an institutional legacy. We've always had the challenge of working with consultants, largely global North consultants coming to the global South, developing NDCs and NAPs and everything. But the LDC group is saying we have institutions within the LDCs themselves. We have universities within the LDCs themselves. How do we strengthen the capabilities of local institutions to support governments to deliver on adaptation than relying on external resources who come do the work and go away? So we are trying to work with local institutions within countries in terms of fund management or building capabilities, supporting governments to deliver on the Paris goals within the LDC group, which is sustainable, which is long-term. Understanding climate risks, I talked about risk assessments. We work a lot with the meteorology departments, trying to understand really what is the science, what is the local knowledge through those locally led processes, so that it's really a comprehensive and coherent program. Flexibility, I also talked about running a semi-pooled fund. We've really pushed the boundaries on flexibility, because convincing donors to give money without funding any particular projects, but funding building systems, capabilities, and letting communities decide, I think is something really exciting and new. And of course, other areas on transparency and accountability and partnerships also speak to the other principles on collaborative action. So that's what LIFE-AR is doing to really enhance the LLA principles.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. And so we've gone over a little bit on time, but I want still to spend a little bit of time, if you've still got a few minutes. I want to ask, firstly, Cham, just in terms of some closing remarks, what would you share with the audience around what you've learned on access to climate finance by LDCs to support this type of ground movement? Cham, over to you.
Thank you very much, Grant. I will conclude by saying that the LDC, initiative, which is LIFE-AR, is quite, a reliable and a dependable approach that we deem would be a system that would support as much as possible to leverage climate finance in the best way as far as communities are concerned, much especially when it comes to adaptation and resilience building, which we as climate change, understand that vulnerability and resilience building is for the communities and vulnerable groups. So in that case, we want to say that LIFE-AR, as it works to reduce, intermediaries and unnecessary bureaucracies in accessing, climate finance by communities, needs to be, championed by donors, by experts, and other philanthropics. We understand, LIFE-AR works very crucially and importantly in enhancing transparency on climate finance by putting in place all-inclusive system that reduce technical issues that hinder communities and local people from accessing climate finance, because we already know what is our problem, but how do we actually approach it? So LIFE-AR got a very reliable and dependable approach, which we think will liberate the communities for accessing and in the most effective and efficient manner in building their resilience and adaptation by accessing climate finance. Lastly, it will be important for us to also understand by definition what is climate finance, which the LDC is very much particular with. Anything that you see, the first impression is its definition, which will guide us as much as possible. But I understand at the level of LIFE-AR, we are very much resolved and committed to see that development finance in terms of climate change reaches the people in the most effective and efficient manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cham. And Tracy, what stands out for you as a lesson or a few lessons from the work of LIFE-AR to date?
Thank you, Grant, and thank you, Cham, for those very good conclusions. Just to add to Cham's, that we also need to define what local means, because local can mean very many things. So, yeah. But for me, the takeaway is what I'm really picking out of LIFE-AR. The systems approach is really, really important, because we can't talk about local when we've not looked at systems. Do we have the right policies, the channels, the mechanisms, the governance systems to enable that to happen? I think that's important, and we are trying to look at things holistically across the whole ecosystem. That is important. But also increasing climate finance for LDCs is really important, because even if we set the targets of 70-30, it's fascinating, it's interesting. But if we don't get money into the system, then we are not able to achieve that. So we'll keep piloting small things, small funding, but at the end of the day, we don't get the real scale and impact of what we are trying to achieve. We also need to really push the boundaries, because when we talk about these things, business unusual, they sound undoable, but we need to move away from the colonial aid legacies of donor, recipient, rules. You have to account by the end of the year, I'm taking away the money. We need donors that can come on board and really push the boundaries and build trust with LDCs and local institutions that we are all aiming for the same thing, and we can be flexible to achieve those outcomes. And the last one is really letting communities decide what the outcomes should be of what we're trying to do. We didn't talk about our mail system in LIFE-AR, but we are so tied up into metrics that either make it easy for us technical people to collect information than the changes that communities actually want to see on the ground. I'll end with a conversation I had with an energy expert who was saying communities don't realize energy is such an important issue for them. He was surprised that when he goes to do assessment, nobody's talking about it. And I was saying, maybe the community you went to, energy was not their problem. Why don't you listen to what their problems are? And you might go to another one where energy is number one. So outcomes should be determined by communities based on the climate experiences they face, as well as the other investments that we are looking at in adaptation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tracy, and thank you, Cham. You've explained it really fantastically. I'm very excited about the work you're doing at LIFE-AR. It's fantastic transformation of how we go about mobilizing climate finance, putting ownership where it should be, and ensuring that the mechanisms are in place for that to work effectively. You talked about planning, about governance, about capability. I'd love to talk for a lot longer with you about this. Maybe we can schedule another session at some stage to dig deeper into some of these issues. If there's anything that I can do, you can do to help spread the message, we're very happy to do that. Thank you very much to all the audience. I hope you found this useful and inspiring as I have. Please let us know in the comments what you thought of the session. We run these live sessions regularly, so please do sign up for future sessions. If you're not already following me or Eco on LinkedIn, please do connect now. And if you found this discussion useful, please repost it to your profile. I think this message needs as much distribution as possible. So thank you so much, Tracy. Thank you, Cham. Behind the scenes, Sandy has been making everything work smoothly. And thank you to all the audience for connecting with us. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you here. And for all the questions that we didn't manage to get to, we will address them in the comments. And I invite both Cham and Tracy to engage there as well. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, Grant and your team, and all our audience. Thank you for creating this time to be with us. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Grant, and the whole team, those at the manifest and also at the behind scene. It's a pleasure and amazing, to be in the platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cham. I'm sorry about that.